will be referred to the Committee on Rules as appropriate.
Mr. President, if I may add, sa pagkakalam ko po, Senator Padilla, sa pagkakausap ko rito sa ating sekretariat, yung mga iba po yung panukalang batas na inahin, katulad nung meron yata pinag-usapan tungkol sa balikatan, ay nararapat lang yata na i-refer sa pangunahing komite, ang Committee on National Defense. At secondary committee lang po ang inyong komite, yung Committee on Public Information. Gayon din ang mga patungkol sa climate change. Ang pangunahing committee po ay ang Environment and Natural Resources. Ang pangalawang secondary committee po, yung inyong committee, yung Committee on Public Information. Yan po ay sinasabi po ng ating secretariat.
Opo, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo. Yun nga po yung gusto po nating liwanagin. Kaya nga po tayo ay humihingi po ng pag-amyenda sapagkat nakikita po natin, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, na sa panahon po ngayon, mas marami na pong fake news. Natatalo na po ng fake news ang mga tunay na dapat ay ibinabalita at ipinararating ng gobyerno sa taong bayan. Katulad po nung isang beses, narinig po natin ang ating kasama na si Senator J.B. Ejercito, sinabi din po niya na yung patungkol po sa Universal Health Law na hindi din po alam ng taong bayan ang patungkol dito. Nakakalungkot po yun, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, na hindi po natin bibigyan ng bagong jurisdiction ang ating pong public information sapagkat sa ngayon po, mahal na Pangulo, umaasa na lang po ang taong bayan sa kung sino-sinong mga vlogger na nagsasalita sa social media, yun na po ang kanilang pinaniniwalaan. Ang hinihingi lang po natin, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, na magkaroon po ng talakayan patungkol po dito sa mandato ng ating pong Komite ng Public Information. Yun lamang po, Ginoong Pangulo, marami pong salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Padilla.
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. President.
Senator
Just a
Villanueva.
very short manifestation and in connection to the statements made by our distinguished colleague. I think it's about time, Mr. President, that we look into all this proliferation of fake news. I remember last Congress we filed a bill regarding anti-fake news bill, and I think it is important to note na kung ang impormasyon ay mali, mapatunayang mali, ngunit ang intensyon ay tama, Mr. President, madali mo ma-justify. But if it is clearly, Mr. President, trying or spreading lies, coming up with a totally absurd, ridiculous information, then dapat magkaroon ng pananagutan ang mga ito. Because, Mr. President, I commiserate with our colleague kasi I think lahat naman ho tayo na natatamaan ng mga kung sino-sinong vloggers or media outfits. Yung iba nga po, kahit mainstream, Mr. President, kahit mainstream, hindi naman natin sasabihin lahat laging katotohanan yung kanilang sinasabi. But I'm just concerned, Mr. President, doon sa pananagutan, yung word na pananagutan. Kasi, for example, Mr. President, can you imagine a media outlet that would say, for example, Mr. President, natalo yung UST sa UAAP, kasalanan ni Joel Villanueva. But that's the headline, Mr. President. Bigyan ka ng mas malalim na topic, Mr. President, or I'm sorry for the word, mas bastos, Mr. President, para lang mag-clickbait, kunyari, Mr. President, and walang pananagutan, Mr. President. Zero accountability. I'm not even sure, Mr. President, if the kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas can actually do something about it, or are they actually doing its part to regulate, Mr. President, or at least have that oversight function, Mr. President. So I feel, Mr. President, that this is important considering na yung fake news, lalong-lalo na, ay laganap sa ating bayan. Just to put that on record, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Villanueva.
Apo, Ginoong Pangulo, bilang panghuli lamang po, gusto ko lamang pong ipaliwanag muli na malinaw po sa ating konstitusyon, dito po sa Section 7, ito po ang sinasabi dito, the right of the people to information on matters of public concern shall be recognized. Access to official records and to documents and papers pertaining to official acts. Ginoong Pangulo, kapag tayo po ang nagpapatawag ng hearing dito po sa Committee on Public Information, nakakalungkot po, ang lagi pong sinasagot sa amin ng mga taga-gobyerno, hindi, nag-hearing na kami doon sa isang committee, hindi na kami pupunta dyan. Yun po ang nakakalungkot, Ginoong Pangulo. Gusto ko lamang pong ipaalala muli sa lahat na wala pong pinakamataas na batas kundi ang konstitusyon. At ang Constitution po, sinasabi, maliwanag ang kapangyarihan ng public information. Yun lamang po. Maraming salamat po uli.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. And Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2555 under Committee Report number 191. This is the bill amending the Motorcycle Crime Prevention Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
The parliamentary status of the measure, Mr. President, is that we have closed the period of committee amendments, and with the consent of the body, I move to open the period of individual amendments, and that I may be recognized as well, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yes, Senator Padilla.
Sir, meron lang po akong gustong itanong sa atin pong madyo. Mr. President, kanino po natin to i-refer?
Mr. President, to the Committee on Rules, taking into consideration the previous manifestation by the Senate President Pro Tem that the Committee on Justice, Committee on Defense, be given the opportunity to take part in the committee hearings as the primary committee, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President.
Yes, you are correct. Senator Padilla.
Hindi po ba pag-uusapan muna yung amenda natin na madyo? Ginoong Pangulo, hindi po ba natin pag-uusapan muna ito sa Committee on Rules para kung amendahan natin yung ating ano? Pwede po mag-request po ng 1 minute suspension lang ako.
Session suspended for a minute.
Sponsor of this measure, Mr. President, and to propose amendments would be the Minority Leader, the Honorable Senator Aquilino Pimentel III, and to be followed by the Honorable Senator Ronald De La Rosa.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, the Majority Leader is our sponsor. Am I correct, Mr. President? Tama? The Majority Leader, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. On page 2, line 9, I move that we replace the phrase new ownership with the phrase original registration. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is accepted.
On the same page, line 14, delete the phrase
Amendment
on
pala.
cash basis.
We accept, Mr. President.
Amendment is accepted.
Ano ito? Ano ito nakabuo? Papapalit. On the same page, line 22, after the word motorcycle, insert a comma and then replace the phrase starting with on installment until acquisition scheme with the following entry, where ownership is retained by the seller and the buyer is given the right to use and possess the motorcycle until full payment of the purchase price, comma, such agreement shall be reduced in writing and shall serve as authority to use the motorcycle, period. Mr. President.
You accept it, Majority Leader?
I accept, Mr. President, with just one clarificatory question. Will the agreement that would be reduced in writing be considered as an agreement more than a usufructuary contract, and would it enable the owner to mortgage said motorcycle unit?
This is more than a use of agreement, Mr. President, because there's already an agreement to pay in full the purchase price. So parang sa real property, parang you are already allowed to possess the property and yet you're still paying installment
Hulugan.
credited to the purchase price. Parang ganun po. So it's more, in my opinion, if we are to compare it to a usufructuary agreement, it is more than a usufructuary because the person in possession and using the motor vehicle will ultimately be the owner upon payment of the purchase price, Mr. President.
So Mr. President, a follow-up question. Would this in effect enable the buyer to sell the motorcycle?
Mr. President, I think yung interest that can be subject to commercial transaction. Your interest in a thing, in an object, Mr. President. So in my opinion, yes, for as long as properly documented, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. We accept just the same, Mr. President, the proposed amendment.
Correct. Amendment is accepted.
On page 3, line 15, Mr. President, insert the phrase after the figure there in parentheses, insert the phrase, provided that no seizure shall be made solely on the failure of the buyer to comply with the requirements of this section. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
Amendment is accepted.
On page 5, line 15, delete the word "and," Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Amendment is accepted.
On the same page, lines 19 to 20, replace the phrase 5,000 pesos together with the figure with the following phrase 10,000 pesos together with the figure 10,000 pesos inside the parentheses, Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
Again, Mr. President, just a clarificatory question. It would appear that the amendments being proposed right now would increase the penalty.
Yes.
But at the same time, in the previous sections, we are being very liberal in terms of the acquisition of the buyer. How do we reconcile this? Pwede mong bilhin yung motor, pero pag pwede mong bilhin yung motor, nasa yun na yung motor, pero malaki yung penalty mo.
Well, the first amendment, Mr. President, is about the transactions that we will allow. This is really about the penalty, Mr. President. So this is a matter of policy. Do we increase the fine or not? The proponent believes that 5,000 pesos is not commensurate to the nature or gravity of the offense, Mr. President. So to discourage the act that we want to penalize, Mr. President, we increase the fine, the amount of the fine.
But just,
Kasi kinumpare po namin sa other penalties. Ito po ay intentional use. There is really the clear intent to violate the law. So that's why we make the penalty graver, Mr. President.
thank you, Mr. President, for that clarification. We accept.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
So in the same spirit as the same reasoning as the previous amendment, on page 6, line 4, the proposal is to replace the phrase 10,000 pesos plus the figures with 20,000 pesos in words and figures, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President, following the same line of reasoning.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
And last, Mr. President, same logic, no? Following the same reasoning, page 6, lines 23 to 24, replace the phrase 10,000 pesos in words and figures with 20,000 pesos in words and figures.
We accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
That would be all, and we thank the sponsor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minority Leader. I think Senator Bato, we're going to propose some amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the indulgence of the good sponsor, I am going to make my personal amendments.
Please proceed. Individual.
Yes,
Individual amendment.
individual. Sorry, Mr. President. Individual amendments.
We concur, Mr. President, with the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good sponsor. On page 6, line 10, after the close parenthesis, delete the following, provided that if the person who sells or buys the number plate proves that he or she has no knowledge that it was erased, tampered, altered, forged, or imitated, he or she shall be punished by a fine of not more than 10,000 pesos. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
On page 6, line 28, after the word plate, insert and RFID. I so move, Mr. President.
Would it be a continuing committee or would it be
As is,
Yes.
as is in the regular course of business until and unless a replacement shall have been elected vice the incumbent or concurrent chairman in order so as not to stifle the functioning of the committees whoever is the chairman shall continue to serve as the same until he or she shall have been replaced, as the case may be, in order not to affect the functioning of the committees. Senate President Zubiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Senate President. Yeah, I just wanted to find out for clarification that the RCEP is a treaty, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So was it placed in the treaty that the Senate President pro temp is actually going to sit in the Oversight Committee, dear Majority Leader, Mr. President? Or was it placed in the treaty? Or was it only approved in the resolution that we agreed upon here? Okay, may I ask
The information I got from the former Senate President pro tempore is that the oversight function, the chairperson of that oversight committee, is attached to the position of whomsoever is the Senate President pro tempore. Therefore, it follows that if a new committee chair is elected, he performs the same functions, Mr. President.
Yeah, do you want me to clarify it?
Yeah, yes, Mr.
Senator
President.
Legarda is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Allow me to clarify it, since that was a time when the Senate President and this representation defended and co-sponsored the concurrence in the ratification of the Regional Cooperation Economic Agreement, the RCEP. And so we had several provisions in consultation with the sectors who were challenging it or were not in favor. And when the Senate unanimously agreed to pass or concur in the ratification of the RCEP, we put a colatilia, if I may use that word, where an oversight committee will be created to regularly monitor our compliance with the RCEP and its effects on agriculture, MSMEs, and various sectors in our economy. And so the Senate President pro tempore at the time, this representation, conducted hearings. In fact, I was supposed to have a hearing the other day, but because of the change, I canceled the hearing. So I wanted it reflected that the change obviously would go to the Senate President pro tempore so that we are in compliance with the regular oversight hearings, which is part and parcel of the concurred in treaty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Legarda. Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Mr. President, in the past oversight committees, we allowed the chamber to designate a representative or to delegate upon the concurrence of the members. Senate President Pro Tem Estrada would like to ask if Senator Loren Legarda is willing to continue, because it's such a complicated but important treaty that if she is willing to continue chairing that oversight committee, Senator Estrada will be more than grateful. Yeah. It's her choice, Mr. President. I'm just saying in the past, we have delegated members of the Oversight Committee.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
I appreciate the intervention of the good senator, but we unanimously approved the concurrence in the ratification of the treaty and specifically mentioned the office of the Senate President pro tempore. In fact, it wasn't even the Foreign Relations Chair. And so, allow me to share the interest and knowledge of this very challenging RCEP, right? So we leave it to the body. Please let the Senate President pro tempore conduct the hearings. Thank you, Mr. President.
If the chair may intervene, with the permission of the lady and gentleman on the floor, the designated representative to the RCEP is the office of the Senate President pro tempore, which means the Senate President pro tempore himself or herself, or he may designate a member to so take his place. It's just like the EDCOM. Under the law, it should be the chairman of the Committee on Higher Education and Basic Education, and I designated a member, in fact, our distinguished minority floor leader, to represent me in the EDCOM too. So if the Senator Estrada will allow,
Take on the responsibility unless in caucus he decides that some person or committee would like to take the task. But at this point, Mr. Senate President, may I move that we elect the chairperson of the Committee on Ethics and Privileges. May we elect Senator Tolentino, our majority leader, as chairman of the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges.
there is a motion. Hearing none, Senator Tolentino is so elected.
Thank you, Mr. Senate President. Ethics Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the good senator from Taguig. May we have a point of inquiry, Mr. President, as to the status of the Oversight Committee.
Can the majority leader reiterate the motion?
Have we finally...
The maritime?
No, Mr. President. The query of Senator Legarda.
Senator Cayetano earlier stated when he was performing his function, a function as acting majority floor leader, that Senator Jinggoy may so decide, but as of yet he has not.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So we will await that decision after conferring with Senator Legarda.
Mr. President, at this juncture, Mr. President, the minority leader is seeking the floor.
On the topic, Mr. President, on the same topic of the RCEP
The
Oversight
minority
Committee,
leader is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
I looked at the resolution of concurrence. It's very specific. The Oversight Committee is headed by the Senate President pro tempore, Mr. President. So, actually, that was the mechanism we invented when we concurred in that particular treaty. It follows the position. So, we have to follow our resolution of concurrence. Delikado i-amend, Mr. President, because I do not know kung pwede nga i-amend yun kasi communicated na po yata sa United Nations or sa Secretariat of the treaty, Mr. President. So, the opinion of this representation, we invented this mechanism. It follows, the chairmanship of that Oversight Committee follows the position, Mr. President.
The chair stands corrected. The opinion enunciated by our distinguished minority floor leader is well taken. Having read the specific provision of the law, and for the information of our minority floor leader, there is no way by which we can amend it at this point in time. Majority leader is recognized. Senator Legarda is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Mr. President, just so that it's on record, the RCEP resolution, I would like to quote, that the Special Oversight Committee on the RCEP agreement is hereby created and shall be headed by the Senate President pro tempore with the following members, and it states the members, majority, minority leaders, chairpersons of the following committees, agriculture, foreign relations, etc. So it's very clear, Mr. President. So I agree with the minority leader that it would be difficult to change the contents of a concurrence. It was a unanimous, except maybe one. Yeah, resolution. Okay. Oh, the deputy minority said that she did not concur. But anyway, it was a majority. Almost majority, more than 2/3 concurrence. So having said that, I appreciate my colleagues in granting me the privilege of continuing the work. And I can tell you it's very interesting and very, very challenging. However, to make life simpler and to abide by the resolution, we leave it with the office of the pro tempore. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair would like to thank the magnanimity of Senator Legarda.
Mr. President,
Senator Estrada.
on another item, Senator Estrada.
Senator
is seeking the
Estrada.
floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As your new Senate President pro temp, I am willing to accept the challenge, and I will have to fulfill my duties and responsibilities as your Senate President pro temp. And if I can make on another matter, Mr. President,
The gentleman may proceed.
with regard to resolutions number 1024, 1025, 1028, introduced by all of these resolutions were introduced by Senator Padilla, and was referred to committees on agriculture. I was 1024. The resolution number 1024 is referred to the Committee on Agriculture. 1025 Committee on Environment, and 1028 Committee on Agriculture, which is both chaired by Senator Cynthia Villar. And Senator Cynthia Villar has already agreed to form a subcommittee which shall be chaired by Senator Robin Padilla, Mr. President.
The remarks of our Senate President pro tempore are duly noted. The subcommittees are to be created by Senator Villar, authorizing Senator Padilla to so conduct hearings during the break.
Mr. President, we therefore withdraw our previous manifestation that the same be referred to the Committee on Rules, and we concur with the manifestation of the Senate President pro tempore to enable our colleague here, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, to conduct hearings, multiple hearings during the break, Mr. President.
The withdrawal is duly noted.
Mr. President, we're supposed to move forward on the period of amendments insofar as the livestock bill is concerned. And the Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano is supposed to propose several amendments, but since I don't see her yet on the floor, Mr. President,
Loren muna.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Exposed po sa abuso, exploitation, at unfair labor practice. Mr. President, I just want to put on record, and I'm very happy to join the gentleman from Isabela and Davao in reporting to the body that we emphasize that the Commission on Higher Education maintains jurisdiction over maritime higher education institutions, which is consistent po, Mr. President, with Section 3, Letter D of the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers, which refers to CHED's policies and rules on education of maritime students and training cadets. And furthermore, Mr. President, last but not the least, yung Marinas Administration over maritime education should be interpreted in conjunction with the mandate of the CHED pursuant to RA 7722 or the Higher Education Act of 1994. Mr. President, sa pangkalahatan, ang panukala pong ito ay isang katibayan ng ating pagpapahalaga sa ating mga marino. Ito po ay pagpapatunay sa ating dedikasyon na itaas ang dignidad at antas ng pamumuhay ng ating overseas at domestic seafarers, ang ating mga bagong bayani. Kaya, Mr. President, sinasamahan ko po ang motion ng ating kasamahan para iratipika ang nasabing panukala. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo.
The remarks of the gentleman from Bulacan are duly noted and well taken.
Mr. President, the Deputy Minority Leader is seeking the floor.
Mr. President, may I also move that the joint explanation of the conference committee be inserted into the records of the Senate?
The chair will defer action on the motion until we have heard Senator Ontiveros, and thereafter we will act on the same. Senator Ontiveros is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Salamat, Mr. President, at magandang gabi po. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and to say thank you and to give credit where credit is due. Unang-una, salamat kay Chair Raffy Tulfo sa kanyang paninindigan at pagsisikap para maayos ang ilang issues tungkol sa bond. Alam ko sa puso niya, tulad ko, dapat ang Magna Carta of Seafarers should serve the interest of all Filipino seafarers. Salamat din sa aking Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, sa pagsuporta at sa pakikiisa sa tunay na diwa ng batas na ito. At kay Senator Joel Villanueva sa kanyang walang sawang suporta sa mga issues ng mga manggagawa, partikular sa mga marino. Kay Comsec Alan at sa mga masisipag nating mga legis staff sa kanilang ambag at sakripisyo para mabuo ang Magna Carta of Seafarers. The Magna Carta of Seafarers is very close to my heart because every Filipino seafarer deserves greater protection from abuses and violations of their rights and welfare. This law is for every overseas Filipino worker seafarer who has been called a modern-day hero because of his or her economic contributions through remittances, and most importantly, because of their sacrifices in being homesick to give a comfortable life to their loved ones. Narinig namin kayo, mga kababayan. Hindi sapat na manatili lamang silang mga buhay na bayani habang sila ay nakikipagsapalaran at nagbabanat ng buto sa karagatan na walang sapat na batas na magtataguyod ng kanilang mga karapatan at proteksyon. At sa wakas, ngayon ay magiging isang ganap na batas na. The Magna Carta should be the anchor of every Filipino. No one should be left behind, including cadets. Every Filipino seafarer's rights should be protected in accordance with international labor organizations, Maritime Labor Convention, and most especially with the Philippine Constitution. Sabi ko nga kanina, give credit where credit is due. At isang taos-pusong at walang humpay na pasasalamat at pagpupugay sa ating mga Filipino seafarers. Kayo po talaga ang bida dito, higit sa lahat. Mabuhay ang bawat overseas Filipino worker, mabuhay ang bawat marinong Filipino. Saludo ako sa inyong pagsisikap. Patuloy kaming susuporta sa inyong kapakanan at seguridad kasama ng inyong pamilya. Maraming pong salamat, Mr. President.
Chair thanks the distinguished lady, and her remarks are duly noted and well taken. Now, acting on the previous motions of
Yes, Mr. President.
Majority Leader is recognized.
Corollary to the motion of Senator Tulfo, I move that we approve and ratify the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2221 and House Bill 7325, and let the text of the joint explanation be deemed read into the records of the chamber. So moved, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing no objection, the same is approved. The bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2221 and House Bill number 7325 is hereby approved on and ratified. Senate President Zubiri is recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Senator President Escudero. No, just a point of information. under your leadership, under my leadership, we had several measures that we passed and ratified that was returned, or well, asked by Malacanang to bring it back to us. I hope that we can, and this happened with the Magna Carta for Seafarers. I feel bad for Senator Raffy, to be honest. Kasi nasa Malacanang na tayo, pumunta tayo doon para pirmahan itong Magna Carta for Seafarers, only to be told 5 minutes before the signing that it was not going to be ratified, signed by the President, and to be returned to the Senate or the Senate and House BICAM panel because of certain issues. I feel for our members here. For example, another one is the maritime law of Senator Tolentino, which again was requested by the Executive Secretary's office to be returned once again to the BICAM body of both houses. Just an information to help the new administration of the Senate President is maybe we can appeal to the PLLO to work with BICAM panels already, kasi kung may problema habang maaga pa lang, kasi hindi maganda tignan, rinatify natin tapos diktahan tayo ng Malacanang. Usually, alam naman po natin yan, Senate President, usually pag pinadala natin dyan, it's are usually signed or lapsed into law, or really if there's objectionable provisions, they will veto it. But if they can work with us, we appeal to Malacanang through the PLLO, if they can work with the Senate already as early as the bicameral conference committee meetings, so that hindi na po natin kailangan ibalik dito sa Senado at sa Kongreso. So just a point of information, my dear Senate President, I'm sure Dong Mendoza is a good friend of ours. Maybe they can assign more people to make sure that the bicameral conference committee, during the hearings of the bicameral conference committee, they participate so that it doesn't have to be returned to the Senate in case there are questionable provisions by the executive department. So yun lamang po.
Thank you, Mr.
The
President.
point of information of Senate President Zubiri is well taken and noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may also, just to echo the sentiments of our former Senate President Zubiri, it's quite disheartening, Mr. President, and disappointing that in the past, if I'm not mistaken, 6 months, Mr. President, there are 3 measures, dalawa po enrolled bills na, Mr. President, pinabalik po sa atin. Pangalawa, yung isa po, katatapos lang ng bicameral conference committee report, ni-ratify po natin, pinabalik po ulit. So, ang question natin, Mr. President, is where's PLO all along, di ba? Kasi kung nababantayan po ito, at least, Mr. President, alam po natin, Mr. President, sabi nga po ni Senator Cayetano, imungkahi ko daw po sa mga batas, lagay din natin na no U-turn. Thank you, Mr. President.
The remarks of the gentleman from Bulacan are well taken. And let copies of the statements they made be furnished to the PLLO, although I see him within hearing distance. Majority Leader is
Mr.
recognized.
President, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution 1037.
There is a motion. Hearing no objection, the same is approved. Secretary General is directed to read the title of the measure.
Resolution commending Honorable Joel Villanueva for his invaluable contribution to the performance of the Senate and for ably steering the proceedings of the Senate in the first and second regular sessions of the 19th Congress of the Philippines.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt proposed Resolution 1037.
Prior to the motion, except for Senator Villanueva, may I include as co-authors all the members present, unless with the exclusion of Senator Villanueva.
Of course, Mr. President, I'd be
Mr.
delighted to have
To
you
be
as co-author.
excluded. To be excluded. oh.
Excluded?
I said not to be included because
Not to
it's in your.
Yes, Mr.
All
President.
members present are made co-author. There being no objection, the aforestated resolution number 1037 is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. I think it is important that we adhere to what is written in the Bible, that we honor to whom honor is due. Thank you, Mr. President.
As it is, distinguished gentleman from Bulacan, and as it should be.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I move that we now consider proposed Senate Resolution 1038, authored by this representation, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing none, Secretary General is directed to read the title of Senate Resolution number 38.
Resolution commending the Honorable Legarda for exemplary performance as Senate President pro tempore during the first and second regular sessions of the 19th Congress of the Philippines.
Majority Floor Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution 1038.
Again, with the permission of members on the floor, with the exception of Senator Legarda, all members present are hereby made co-authors. There being no objection, Senate Resolution number
1038.
1038.
And correction, errata, Mr. President. The principal sponsor here is our good Senate President pro tempore, Jinggoy Estrada.
Senate Resolution number 1038 is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 1036. Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing no objection, Secretary General is directed to read the title of the measure.
Resolution commending the Honorable Juan Miguel Migs F. Zubiri for his excellent performance and outstanding leadership as Senate President during the first and second regular sessions of the 19th Congress of the Philippines.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution 1036, and I likewise move that all present members be made co-authors of the proposed resolution. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing none, Senate Resolution number 1036 is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, the Honorable Mig Zubiri is seeking the floor.
Senate President Zubiri is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you very much, my dear colleagues, Senate President. I'd just like to thank you all for the honor given me today. And of course, I'd like to, as mentioned by the majority, my former majority leader, give honor where honor is due. If we had a phenomenal run for 2 years, so we passed a lot of pieces of legislation, including the legislation that we passed today, it's due to the fact that I had a great team. And I'd like to thank Senate President Pro Temp Lauren Legarda for being the Senate President Pro Temp. And of course, the hardworking, indefatigable Majority Floor Leader, the life of the plenary, no other than Majority Floor Leader Joel Villanueva, and to all the chairmen that we were working with at the time, together with the Secretary at the time. So happy that you retained, Mr. Senate President, the Secretary, Secretary Ray Bantog, the Legis staff, and all the Secretariat. Maraming salamat po, Your Honor. Do we also give an honor to Senator Pimentel, the Minority Leader? Or not necessary? He's not ending his term yet. Yes. So maraming salamat po, Senate President. Let's go there.
Senator Cayetano is
Mr.
recognized.
President, I think all of us want to attach our name in thanking everyone mentioned. Sir President, just a proposal for the EDCOM. So the three members are appointed by the Senate President. In consultation with Senator Pia Cayetano, if Senator Pimentel can take her place as a regular member, then I will take my ex officio membership as chair of the Committee on Higher Education, so that Senator Coco will continue as the representative of the minority. Then Senator Pia and I will discuss after the break if she will come back. But in the meantime, I will take the place.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'm just rising, Mr. President, because I was just told.
The gentleman from Bulacan is recognized.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. President. When I made mention about that particular verse on the Bible, I intend to say it in honor of a Bishop Paperios, Mr. President, of Fort Watch. I just want to put that on record, Mr. President. Thank you.
I meant it to have been talking and referring to you, Your Honor.
Thank you, boss. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader, you're recognized, sir.
Mr. President, I was informed that germane to the manifestation made by the former Majority Leader, that there is a proposed Senate Resolution 1035. The proposed Senate Resolution, with the permission of the body, I move to consider the proposed Senate Resolution 1035, and for the Secretary to read the title of the measure. This is something to do with the biblical phrase mentioned a while ago by the good gentleman from Bulacan. It has something to do with the expression of profound sympathy on the death of Apostle Rol, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing no objection, same is hereby approved. Secretary is directed to read the title of Senate Resolution number 1035.
Resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate on the death of Apostle Senateofthephilippines, founder of the Pentecostal Missionary Church of Christ, Fourth Watch.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we recognize Senator Joel Villanueva to deliver his sponsorship speech.
Senator Villanueva is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I rise with deep sadness to sponsor proposed Senate Resolution number 1035, expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of Apostle Senateofthephilippines, founder of the Pentecostal Missionary Church of Christ, Fourth Watch, Mr. President. Mr. President, Apostle Ferriol generously shared his faith and wisdom to other Christian leaders and his time to the Jesus is Lord Church by attending many of our events. He served, Mr. President, as the good man of the house and chief executive minister of the PMCC Fourth Watch. During his lifetime, Apostle Ferriol was the epitome of a good, faithful, and wise ambassador of the kingdom of God, dedicating his life to God, the church, and his family. Under his leadership, the PMCC Fourth Watch has launched national and global evangelistic churches in different parts of the world, providing spiritual nourishment, enlightenment, and fellowship among its members. The church has grown into 1,000 local and global locations with presence in almost every major city and province in the Philippines and in more than 70 countries all over the world. Mr. President, his passing is undeniably a great loss to the Christian community, but he leaves behind a legacy that will inspire and guide Christians for generations to come. We offer our condolences to his family, the Pentecostal Ministry Church of Christ, the Fourth Watch, and to all the Christians worldwide who have been touched by his life and his faith. Let me end, Mr. President, by quoting Matthew chapter 25, verse 21, where God said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo, and may God bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I likewise request that the good sponsor make me a co-sponsor as well, considering that Apostle Ferriol is a close family friend, Mr. President. And I move likewise that all
Gladly, Mr.
members
President.
of this body be made as co-sponsors.
Gladly, Mr.
Including,
President.
and the speech, the sponsorship speech, likewise, co-sponsorship speech of the Honorable Senator Nancy Binay, also a close family friend of the Binay family, be inserted into the records, Mr. President.
So moved. Hearing no objection, the same is hereby approved. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move for the approval of the Journal of the 76th Session.
Session suspended.
The Senate President pro tempore is seeking the floor. But prior to that, Mr. President, this representation would likewise place into the records our statements of highest esteem for the leadership and hardworking ethics routine delivered by the former Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable Joel Villanueva, for having shepherded various measures during the 19th Congress, Mr. President. And as part of that, Mr. President, I would want to have that inserted into the records. Mr. President,
So inserted.
that manifestation, Mr. President, is anterior to the suggestion of the Senate President pro tempore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just would like to deliver a speech commending my predecessor, former Senate President Pro Temp Lauren Legarda, if I may, Mr. President.
Session is suspended. Majority Floor Leader for the prior motion.
Yes, Mr. President, there being no other member who wishes to interpolate or propose amendments to the proposed resolution, I move that we adopt Senate Resolution 1035, subject to style, and that the same be given forthwith to the bereaved family of the late Apostle Ferriol, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, the same is hereby approved. Proposed Senate Resolution number 1035 is hereby adopted. And the Secretariat is hereby directed to immediately cause the preparation of the resolution to be given to the family of the late pastor through the gentleman from Bulacan, Senator Joel Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate President pro tempore is seeking the floor.
Senator Estrada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, dear colleagues, I rise today to sponsor a resolution commending the exceptional work of my predecessor, our esteemed colleague, the Honorable Senate President Pro Temp Loren Legarda. Senator Legarda started her career in 1998 as the youngest elected senator, and now she is the most senior legislator in the 19th Congress, continuously serving the Filipino people for 4 terms. At syempre, sa mga batang 80s at 90s, kilalang kilala ang pangalan Loren Legarda bilang pinakasikat, multi-awarded at hinahangaang broadcast journalist ng mga dekadang yun. Mr. President, she has a proven track record and it would speak for itself. Hindi na po natin kailangan isa-isahin ang lahat ng naipasa niyang batas dahil hindi na po yan mabilang simula nang pumasok siya sa Senado. Our former Senate President Pro Temp is an environmentalist and a staunch advocate of our cultural heritage. Her contributions stand out as a shining example of leadership and commitment to this important advocacy. And her dedication and tireless effort have not only protected our environment, but have also paved the way for our leaders to continue this very vital concern of the present times. Sa panahong hindi pa halos pinapansin ang mga environmental issues, climate change at natural disasters, nangunguna na po si Senator Legarda sa advokasya niya sa pagkakaroon ng climate-proof future para sa ating mga kababayan. Ginoong Pangulo, hindi may tatanggi ang dedikasyon ni Senator Legarda sa ating institusyon dahil minsan na rin siya naging Senate Majority Leader, ang nag-iisang female Majority Leader sa kasaysayan ng ating Senado. She has earned the respect not only of the Filipinos, but also recognized globally, especially the United Nations Global Champion on Resilience, among many accomplishments she continues to do while being a 4th-term senator. A visionary leader and a dedicated public servant. Sobrang sipag kahit Biyernes po pumapasok sa kanyang tanggapan. And I should know because she is my neighbor in the 6th floor. At katuwang ko siya dahil pumahilig po magpakain sa mga kapwa niya senador katulad ko rin. In closing, Mr. President, Senator Loren Legarda's dedication as Senate President Pro Temp earned her the respect and admiration of her peers and the public, reinforcing her legacy as a visionary leader and a steadfast defender of the rights and welfare of the Filipino people. Today, we commend her body of work, her leadership, and her exemplary performance as Senate President Pro Tempore during the 1st and 2nd regular session of the 19th Congress. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr.
The
President.
remarks of Senator Jinggoy are noted.
Mr. President, I was informed of the readiness of 2 of our colleagues to proceed within a short period of time, and I have been promised, Mr. President, that all contentious provisions were already agreed upon, thrashed out in details, Mr. President. And I'm referring now, Mr. President, to our lady colleagues who are still present in this chamber, Mr. President, specifically the Honorable Senator Cynthia Villar. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2558. This bill is on the Livestock, Poultry, and Dairy Industry Development Competitiveness Act, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing no objection, the same is approved. The Secretary General is directed to read the title of the measure.
2558. Amendment to and strengthening livestock, poultry, and dairy industry development and competitiveness, rationalizing the organization and functions of relevant government agencies, and creating a competitiveness enhancement fund, therefore.
I understand this is in the stage of period of individual amendments.
Yes, Mr. President.
And for this purpose, the Chair recognizes our hardworking chairperson of the Committee on Agriculture, Senator Cynthia Villar, and the lady from Taguig, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Mr. President, Senator Pia Cayetano will make her amendments.
Senator Cayetano is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, these are short amendments which we worked on for many hours with the staff of Senator Villar, our sponsor. But for the information of the body, so those who are interested may follow, these amendments are with respect to the jurisdiction of FDA and bureaus under the Department of Agriculture for clarification, Mr. President. So my first amendment will start on page 13, line 30. Delete the word processing and replace it with handling. Submit.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept the amendment. Ito ba yun? Yun supposed to be, babasahin ko.
The proposed amendment having been accepted, the same is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next item is number 2 on the same page 13, line 30. Delete the phrase process livestock and poultry produce and replace it with post-harvest stages.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved and adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next amendment is on page 15. And this is on line 4. Delete the phrase processed meat products, comma, meat processing, and replace it with post-harvest stages. We submit.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved and adopted.
Thank you. Mr. President, on page 15, line 8, after the word establishments, insert the phrase in the primary production and post-harvest stages.
Okay.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved and adopted.
And then still on page 15, delete lines 26 to 29 and replace it with, in accordance with Republic Act number 10611 or the Food Security Act of 2013, the DA shall continue to regulate the primary production and post-harvest stages of the food supply chain.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved and adopted.
Mr. President, just for the record, the rationale for the amendments is because these processed meats are considered health products that are regulated by the FDA to ensure safety and quality to protect public health. I move on, Mr. President, to my next amendment, which is still on page 15, lines 30 to 32. And it goes on to page 16. So the amendment is delete lines 30 to 32 on page 15 and lines 1 to 11 on page 16, thereby deleting the entire section 13.
Okay.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved and adopted.
And for the record, the rationale for this amendment is to ensure that we lodge the veterinary drugs and products, the regulation of veterinary drugs and products would continually be lodged with the FDA. Thank you, Mr. President.
The remarks of the lady are noted.
Can we ask her to repeat that last amendment?
It was not an amendment, distinguished sponsor. It was a
Explanation.
rationale behind the proposed amendment.
Okay. So, we accept. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next set of amendments will start on page 17, line 31. So I have page 17, line 31, and line 32. And then it goes on to the next page, which is page 18 and line 1. So I will read this together. On page 17, line 31, after the word all, insert the word local.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept.
Thank you, Mr.
The proposed
President.
amendment having been accepted, it is hereby approved and adopted.
On page 17, line 32, delete the word including.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept.
Having been accepted, the same is hereby approved and adopted.
And on page 18, line 1, delete the phrase but not limited to domestic and international trading.
What does the
accept.
sponsor say? Having
Yep.
been accepted, the same is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 18, after line 17, insert the following paragraphs. Within 150 days from the effectivity of this act, the FDA and BAFS shall harmonize the standards and guidelines for the regulation of local milk and milk products. Next paragraph. Within 120 days from the effectivity of standards and guidelines, the FDA shall complete the capacitation of NDA in the implementation of the food safety standards and guidelines for the regulation of local milk and milk products. Next paragraph. Upon determination by FDA on the capability of NDA to fully implement the standards and guidelines set by the FDA and BAFS, the FDA may deputize the NDA in the inspection, licensing, and monitoring of establishments and the registration and monitoring of local milk and milk products. Next paragraph, the FDA shall exercise supervision over NDA's compliance with the standards and guidelines set by the FDA and BAFS. We submit, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept.
Having been accepted, same is hereby approved and adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Still on page 18, line 18, after the word functions, insert the phrase with respect to locally produced milk and milk products. We submit.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept.
Having been accepted, same is hereby approved and adopted.
Still on page 18, line 18, delete the phrase other agencies and replace with FDA.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept.
Having been accepted, same is hereby approved and adopted.
On page 20, line 3, after the word exchange, delete the word exportation and replace with the phrase packaging, exportation of milk and milk products.
What does
We
the sponsor
accept.
say?
We accept.
Having been accepted, same is hereby approved and adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those are my amendments. We recognize that the sponsor would really like this measure passed, and so we worked for many hours with her staff, which I would like to express my gratitude to come up with the amendments. We would like to express our concern, though, that it is a very strong bill that is intended to strengthen local industries, which we fully support, Mr. President. We support the desire of the sponsor to strengthen the local dairy industry, which we feel is the step in the right direction. But this representation, having chaired the Committee on Health and having handled the budget of health for many years, strongly feels that the regulatory process must be in place and that the jurisdiction of FDA must be respected. If there is a need to push FDA, if they're not doing their job, then the proper actions can be taken, Mr. President, but the solution, which we thank the sponsor for accepting, is not to transfer the jurisdiction to a different agency. So on that note, Mr. President, I just also would like to express the concern of DOH that they be given more time to study this measure because of the repercussions. But we have informed them of our opportunity we've had to work with the sponsor, and some of the changes we made have just been made now without the opportunity to consult with DOH. That I leave it up to them to also follow the proceedings, Mr. President, as they have been duly informed. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Madam Sponsor.
We thank the distinguished ladies of the floor. Majority Leader.
We recognize Senator Lauren Legarda to make her amendments.
Mr. President, Senator Legarda a while ago indicated her. May we know the preference of the Honorable Legarda? Will it be today or
Today.
a later date?
Today.
The lady from Antique and Malabon is recognized for her proposed
Ito naman si
amendments.
Yeah, today.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the good sponsor, Senator Cynthia Villar, I wish to propose the following amendments on Senate Bill number 2558. On page 2, line 10, insert an additional policy as follows. The state shall protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature, and in so doing, recognize and apply a true value system, including social and environmental cost implications relative to the utilization, development, and conservation of our natural heritage. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The proposed amendment having been accepted by the distinguished sponsor, same is hereby approved and adopted.
On page 5, line 15, after breeding farms, insert the sentence, provided, that the program shall provide for the use of local heritage breeds, I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
On page 5, line 27, after shrubs, insert the sentence, provided, that the program shall provide for the use of local perennial crops, including endemic and native varieties, or those that can thrive in the country's tropical microclimate, which can be produced by the farmers themselves, I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we accept.
Both amendments having been accepted by the distinguished sponsor, they are hereby approved and adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 5, line 29, between the word animals and colon, insert a and the phrase including its integration into regenerative agriculture practices. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept.
Having been accepted, same is hereby approved and adopted.
On page 6, line 16, between the words in the and propagation, insert the word racing, Moreover, on the same page, line 17, between the word distribution and of, insert a comma, and the phrase and regenerative farming practices. I so move.
We accept, Mr.
Having been
President.
accepted, the same is hereby approved and adopted.
On page 7, after line 24, add the new paragraph N to read as follows. Biodiversity, Natural Resources, and Climate Action Program. It will propose and implement the necessary safeguards to ensure that the Philippines meets its obligations under international conventions and agreements, ensure that the country adopts a nature-first approach in any industry development initiative where every effort must be made to avoid causing harm to the existing biodiversity to align the LPD industry with wider sustainable development outcomes. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
Having been accepted, the proposed amendment is hereby approved and adopted.
I thank the graciousness of the good sponsor for accepting all of my amendments. In summary, Mr. President, these amendments are intended to foster a more robust and sustainable agriculture sector that benefits farmers economically and supports ecological balance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair thanks the distinguished lady from Antigua and Malabon, Majority Leader.
I want to make additional amendment, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Additional amendments.
Anterior
Individual.
amendment.
Yeah. Those they did not read, okay.
The distinguished sponsor is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
On page 18, line 18, after the word functions, insert the phrase with respect to locally produced milk and milk products. I so move, Mr. President.
So moved. Hearing of Senator Pia is recognized.
I would just like to follow that. Can we ask the sponsor to? I would also like to take this opportunity to echo the sentiments of our dear colleague, Senator Grace Poe. I'd like to honor Senator Mig Zubiri, my working partner, which will continue. Senator Mig Zubiri truly shepherded us through very trying times. Many of you will recall the late hours we spent, and I'm sure he and his leadership team spent even more late hours over the past few months, Mr. President. We had many caucuses, many long discussions, and no one can question the Senate President's desire to find a solution. No one can begin to say that not all opportunities, not all roads were explored to find solutions to what may continue to be issues that we will be facing, Mr. President. I truly admire you. And I want to say that I do not know anyone who has the bandwidth for patience and consensus building as your honor has. That bandwidth is something that I would sometimes not just super admire but get frustrated with, because really there is no end to your desire to find a solution to problems, Mr. President. I really want His Honor to remember that, to know that we and I witnessed it and I saw it, and really, Mr. President, that is a trait that we will never forget, and it's a trait that makes you the great leader that you are. I then also would like to commend my brother, Senator Joel Villanueva, who may not have the same style of patience and consensus building as our Senate President, but I had the best laughs with him just to help him get through the difficult task of getting the job done. If our Senate President Zubiri had to work in and outside of the halls of the Senate, our Majority Floor Leader limited, I think, in many ways, limited his life, sacrificed his family life, as the Senate President did, to get things moving here in the Senate. And I also admire him from the bottom of my heart for his patience. It did not always show, but they got the work done. The frustration showed on the face many times. Wag na ho nating asahan na magbabago pa yon, and asahan pa natin na it will show in the days to come. But you are truly loved for who you are, Majority Floor Leader. And then, of course, our Senate President Pro Temp, who needs no introduction. She is who she is. In the Senate we would not be who we are today without the invaluable contribution of our Senate President Pro Temp, who adds decorum, style, culture, never hesitates, including our dinner with the President, to share her deep knowledge of history with all of us, and her passion for protecting the environment and the climate. All of these are words of wisdom that I hope the younger generation will be patient enough to absorb and to understand, because each one of us, as exemplified by our Senate President Pro Temp, carries the history and the humanity of the Senate. So thank you, Madam Senate President Pro Tem. And then, of course, to my chief, the chairman of the Committee on Finance, who very patiently sat through 5 years of hearings and debates floor debates, both on the floor and off the floor, very patiently. And I always wondered why he didn't bother to go home during the hours that he had his vice chairmans on the floor. I would like to think that you trusted us, but you never left, and you should have left and gotten some sleep. But he would always just be in the back watching it from the screen and never leaving during his watch. So again, we're also truly thankful for not just doing your job, but making sure that all of us also had the opportunity to do our job well by accommodating the advocacies that we had, and even finding space for difficult but necessary projects that we all collectively wanted to include in the budget. Thank you for that to my chairman, Senator Angara. And to the rest of the team that completed the leadership of Senate President Zubiri. I know your work could not be done with all of them. They are people who worked with you on and off the floor and on and off hours. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
The remarks of the lady are duly noted. Majority Floor Leader.
Senator Angara is seeking the floor, Mr. President.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not to take up too much time of the plenary at this time, I just want to thank the lady from Taguig for her very kind words, and I loved working with her as the Senior Vice Chair for issues on education and health, which we share a passion for. Thank you very much.
Remarks of the gentleman are noted. Majority Floor Leader.
Just a reminder.
The Senate President Zubiri is
Senate
recognized.
President, yes, thank you very much, Senate President. Just a reminder to the Senate President that this team is a hardworking team. We're the only ones here left, Mr. Senate President, so that you know that we're here to support you to listen to your valedictory, your report to the people of the Republic. If he's going to give a speech, we're here to be with you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senate President Zubiri. I assure you it will be very brief because it's been only 2 days.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I just be allowed to make a very short manifestation?
Senator Villanueva is
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to put on record our sincerest thanks and gratitude to some of our colleagues, namely Senator Poe and Senator Pia Cayetano, for appreciating what we have worked for, the countless hours and the sacrifices, even the extra mile that we needed to walk just to deliver what we can deliver in the name of public service for our country and people. So we just wanted to put on record that we did that not for this particular time where we knew that someday it will be appreciated. Whether it will be appreciated or not, we know that we are doing it for the glory of our God. Thank you, Mr. President.
Remarks of the gentleman are noted. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there are still 4 items left in our agenda for today. And the gentleman from Valenzuela is seeking the floor, but I don't see the minority leader around, Mr. President. So, to expedite, Mr. President, may we, with the permission of Senator Gatchalian, to expedite the proceedings, may we recognize the gentlelady from Capiz to sponsor in quick succession multiple resolutions, Mr. President, concerning.
Session is suspended.
During our last session, I attended. I tried. Pero namaga yung paa eh.
Alam ni majority.
So it's okay, Mr. President. Kahit na mabulok yung paa dito, no problem. Para sa bayan.
You know, under Senator Soto, hindi ganun.
Pare, bastusan na tayo dito eh. Nire-respeto kita.
Don't do that to yourself. Are you in coma? You're not in a coma.
At the risk of...
You know, under Senator Soto, hindi ganun.
Pare, bastusan na tayo dito eh. Nire-respeto kita.
Meron po ba kinalaman sa Senate leadership
direktiba. Ba, hindi niya pwedeng utusan ng senador. Magkahiwalay kami ng ano lang yun. Una, bismillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yung pong paanyaya ng ating mahal na Pangulo, lagi naman po yan, magmula po nang ako ay naging senador, lagi pong may paanyaya ang Pangulo para makasama siya sa hapunan. Pero wala po doon na nangyari na pinag-usapan ang nangyari sa Senado at hindi rin po napag-usapan kung kami ay uutusan niya dahil hindi naman po kami siguro dapat niyang utusan dahil hindi naman po kami sa ilalim niya. Yung pong dinner ay may kinalaman lang sa kwentuhan. Wala pong pinag-usapan na patungkol po sa Senado. Wala po. Wala po. Kung meron pong magbabanggit nun, ako yun. Pero hindi ko naman po nabanggit. Kasi parang casual po na nakakahiya naman magbanggit ng politika. Yung pinag-uusapan, mga anak ko. Tinatanong ng Pangulo, kamusta yung mga anak ko, kamusta yung asawa ko. So parang ang hirap po magpasok ng politika.
Ang nag-ignal daw po sir ng kudeta against Senator Mix is yung quote-and-quote artista blocker, which is yung mga maybe mga lawmakers na dating naging artista. And ang nag-trigger daw nun sir ay yung hindi daw po pagpayag ni Senator Mix na mag-attend virtually si Senator Viralnews dahil dun sa pagbuka ng goodness sa pag. Will you confirm this sir na kayo po or may some sort of naging factor po yun sa pagka-out ni Senator?
Una sa lahat, wala akong reklamo kay Senate President Migs as the Senate President. Wala akong sutuhanan sumusunod ako dyan Okay naman si Migs Yung nangyari, alam nyo, kami ng PDP, 4 kaming PDP. Okay, ako, Senator Bongo, Senator Bato, Senator Tolentino. Kami ay isang partido, kaya ang boto namin ay isa lang. Naiintindihan ko si Senator Bato kung bakit nagkaroon ng naging emosyonal siya sa pangyayari. Kasi talaga namang para sa akin, at alam ko naman yung nangyari dahil ako ang acting presidente ng PDP. Alam ko kung ano yung nangyari sa aming block. Sa aming block kasi, hindi pwedeng maghiwa-hiwalay. Kung ano yung boto ng isa, dapat yun ang boto ng lahat. Kaya nung kinausap namin si Bato, wala naman siyang nagawa. Wala na siyang nagawa. Kasi kailangan mamili siya, partido o yung kanyang matatawag natin na pakikisama kay SP, Migs. Siyempre, nanaig yung pagiging party man niya. Kasi yun ang adhikain ng PDP. Kailangan sumunod ka sa sinasabi ng partido. Yun po ang napagdesisyonan namin. Kaya yung artista block o anong block yan, hindi po. Partido po namin ito ng PDP.
Pero, yun na, bakit po nagpapag-view po ng block na supportahan Senator Escudero as
Siguro po, ang pwede natin tanungin dyan, yung mga veterano dito sa Senado. Kasi kung ang ganyang mga hakbang, hindi po yan pwedeng mag-umpisa sa amin na mga neophyte. Siguro sinabi naman din po ni Senator Chis Escudero, yung ating SP ngayon, na sinabi naman po niya na siya talaga ang nag-umpisa ng mga hakbang, siya ang kumausap sa mga senador. Opo, kaya siguro po sila na lang po ang tanungin natin, yung mga veterano po dito. Siguro ito po para kasi hindi naman po naging unfair sa amin si SB Migs Siguro sa amin na lang po yung rason namin sabi nga ni SP Cheese yung mga ganitong mga pangyayari, hindi naman tayo kailangan magpaliwanag. Sabi niya, basta kung ano yung rason natin, yun na yun. Basta ako, ito po ay desisyon ng partido. Hindi po ito isang desisyon ng isang tao. Kung ano man ang sana ang hinihingi namin, wag naman masyadong kawawa naman si Bato. Kasi wala namang kasalanan si Bato. Si Bato sumunod lang sa partido. Sana maintindihan natin na meron pa dito sa Pilipinas na mga totoong partido politikal na talagang sama-sama.
May I take the
Yes.
floor?
Yes, our distinguished colleague from
I
Cavite
just
is
want to
recognized.
let you, to inform the body, hindi po tayo nagpapaawa dito, This is just a mere parang consideration. Ako, I don't mind for humanitarian reason. I mean, ako, I don't mind. Ako so far, in the past 2 Congress, perfect attendance ang inyong lingkod. Never been late, never been absent. Sino ba namang gustong umabsent dito? That's why I want to be online.
Present during hearings. I'm referring, Mr. President, to the Honorable Senator Ramon Bong Revilla. Lagi ko po nakikita rito na may kulang na lang po wheelchair, Mr. President.
Well, with due respect to our distinguished colleague, the rules is very explicit. We only amended the rules for online sessions for COVID infected individuals or those that have contagious diseases, COVID, TB, Ebola, pagkaganyan, pwede yan online or is bedridden. Were lax. But the rules is very specific. It is only for contagious diseases. But due to humanitarian reasons, because he had his operation last week that he could not stand up, we allowed it. However, he attended a political party rally in Manila Polo Club, was seen by everybody standing beside our president, and therefore he seems fit to be able to join us. And he joined us last Wednesday. To be very fair about it, he did join us last Wednesday. So I leave it now to the majority leader to make the proposition.
Yeah, Mr. President, just to put on record,